The inscription on the tomb had been waiting 400,000 years for someone to read it, and when I finally did, when I brushed away the last of the dust and the ancient letters resolved under my light, it named me. Not my species, not human, me. It said keeper of the Unbroken Seal, and somehow, impossibly, it had been carved before my species learned to walk upright, and it had been waiting all that time for the exact person who would one day stand where I stood and put their hand against the stone. I've had a long time to make peace with that, and I still haven't, not really. Some things you don't make peace with, you just carry them. Let me tell you how it happened. How a human archaeologist touched an ancient tomb on a dead world, and read her own title in letters older than her species, and learned what she'd been chosen to keep. My name is Dr. Lena Marsh, and before any of this I was an archaeologist, a digger of dead worlds, a reader of dead languages, one of the small, strange tribe of humans who'd rather spend their lives among the ruins of vanished civilizations than among the living. The galaxy, when humanity entered it, turned out to be old, achingly old, full of the bones of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before anyone now alive was born, precursor races, vanished empires, the great dead who'd left their ruins scattered across 1,000 worlds. And someone had to read those ruins. That was my work. I loved it the way you love a thing that asks everything of you. The galaxy had a name for the oldest layer of ruins, the deepest and most ancient, the Forerunners. Not a species, a category. The Forerunners were whoever had come first, the civilization or civilizations so old that even the other ancient dead races were young beside them, the ones whose ruins turned up on the most distant worlds, always shattered, always silent, always so old that almost nothing survived. Hundreds of thousands of years. Some said more. The Forerunners had been and gone before the galaxy's current civilizations were even possible, and they'd left almost nothing. A few scattered ruins, a handful of indecipherable inscriptions, and a great deal of speculation. No one knew who they were, or what had happened to them, or why a civilization that had clearly spanned the galaxy had vanished so completely. I'd spent my career chasing the Forerunners. It was the great question of exarchaeology, the deepest mystery, the oldest silence. And it had led me, eventually, to a dead world called Tessin IV, on the far edge of explored space, where a survey had found something that shouldn't have existed, a Forerunner structure that was intact. That was the thing that brought me there. Forerunner ruins were always shattered, 400,000 years will shatter anything, but Tessin IV had a structure that had survived, whole, sealed. A single Forerunner edifice, alone on a dead world, somehow untouched by the deep time that had destroyed everything else they'd left. The galaxy's archaeologists had dreamed of finding something like it for centuries, and the survey that found it, knowing what they had, called for the best Forerunner specialist available. That was me. So I went to Tessin IV, to the one intact Forerunner structure in the known galaxy, and I did not know that I was walking toward my own name, carved in stone before my species existed. Tessin IV was a hard, beautiful, lonely world. Let me set it for you, because the place mattered, places always matter. It was a desert world, mostly. Red and gold and endless, under a sky the color of old bronze, a world that had once had oceans and lost them, a long time ago. The wind never stopped. That's the thing I remember most, the wind, constant, a low voice that never quite went silent, carrying the fine red dust across a landscape where nothing had lived for longer than my species had existed. It was cold at night, brutally, and hot in the day, and the sun was small and white and far. A dead world. A beautiful one, in the way dead things can be beautiful, when they've been dead long enough to become peaceful. And in the middle of it, rising out of the red dunes, was the structure. It didn't look like a tomb at first. It looked like a hill, a low, smooth dome of dark material, half buried in the dunes that you might have walked past if you didn't know. But it wasn't stone and it wasn't a hill. When you got close, you could see that it was made a single piece of some dark, seamless material, older than the desert around it, that the 400,000 years of wind and dust had not been able to scratch. A Forerunner structure, intact, sealed, waiting. Our team was small: me, a few other specialists, a survey crew, and a contingent of conquered observers, because anything Forerunner was of interest to the galactic powers, and they did not let humans poke at the deep past unsupervised. We set up our camp in the lee of the structure, out of the worst of the wind, and we began carefully the slow work of understanding what we'd found. And from the first day I felt it, the thing every archaeologist feels at a truly ancient site, but stronger here than I'd ever felt it. The weight of deep time, the sense of standing somewhere that had been waiting a very, very long time. The structure was silent and sealed and old past comprehension, and it felt like it was waiting. I told myself that was just the romance of the work, the way ruins make you feel. I was wrong. It really was waiting. It had been waiting for me. We found the entrance on the 4th day, and we found the inscription on the 5th, and the inscription is where everything changed. The entrance was a seam, a single door in the seamless dark material, so fine you could barely see it, sealed shut by something we couldn't understand and couldn't open. And around the door, carved into the dark material in the deep precise letters of the Forerunner script, was an inscription. A long one. The most extensive piece of Forerunner writing ever found. By far most Forerunner inscriptions were a few broken symbols, and here was a whole text, intact, waiting to be read. The problem was that Forerunner script had never been fully deciphered. We had fragments, partial translations, educated guesses. Reading a whole intact Forerunner text was beyond what anyone had ever done. The conquered observers wanted to take it slow, to record the inscription, send it back to the great galactic institutions, let the combined expertise of a dozen civilizations work on it for years. That was the sensible approach. That was what we should have done. But I'd spent my whole career on the Forerunners. I'd spent more hours with their script than almost anyone alive. And as I stood before that inscription in the constant wind, with my light playing over letters older than my species, I found that I could read it. Not all of it, but more than I should have been able to, more than anyone should have been able to, the meaning rising out of the ancient symbols as if some part of me already knew them. I have never been able to explain that. I've stopped trying. I stood before a 400,000-year-old inscription, and I read it, and the reading felt less like deciphering and more like remembering. And what it said at the top, in the largest letters, the title of the whole text, was this: "To the keeper of the Unbroken Seal, who will come when the time is right. We have been waiting for you." I didn't tell the others at first that I could read it. I don't fully know why. Instinct, maybe. Something in me went quiet and careful the moment those words resolved, the way you go quiet when you realize you've walked into something far larger than you understood. I told the team I could make out fragments, that it would take time, and I asked for a night alone with the inscription to study it. The conquered observers didn't like it, but I was the specialist, and they gave me the night. And alone, in the wind, with my light and the ancient letters, I read the rest, and it told me a story that I have spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of. The inscription was a message, left by the Forerunners, by the last of them, I understood as I read, for whoever would one day come and read it. And it was not a warning, the way ancient inscriptions in stories always are. It was not a curse or a threat or a boast. It was something I had never encountered in all my years among the dead. It was a request, a plea almost. Left by a dying civilization, carved in stone, cast 400,000 years into the future, hoping that someone would come who could understand it and do what they asked. "We are the last," the inscription said, "and I'm giving you the sense of it," my translation, smoothed from the strange ancient grammar. "We were many once. We spanned the stars. And we made a thing long ago that we should not have made, a thing of great power and great danger that we could neither use safely nor destroy. We tried to destroy it. We could not. It cannot be unmade. So we did the only thing we could. We sealed it." We built this place and we put the thing inside, and we sealed it with the unbroken seal, a seal that cannot be forced, cannot be broken by any power, opened only by one who is worthy to keep it. And then we set a watch, and we waited. And one by one, across the long ages, we died, for we were already dying when we built this place. That is why we built it, because we knew we would not last and we could not leave the thing unwatched. So we leave it to the future, to whoever comes. We do not know who you will be. We do not know your shape or your name or your world. We know only that someday someone will come to this place who can read these words, and that the ability to read them is itself the sign. For we wrote them not in a language to be deciphered, but in a language to be remembered, a language that will resolve only for the one who is meant to keep the seal, the one whose mind is shaped by whatever long road to be a keeper. If you can read this, then you are that one. The seal has chosen you, across all this time as it was made to. You are the keeper of the unbroken seal, and we are so sorry and so grateful, and we have been waiting for you for longer than you can imagine. I stood in the wind and read my own title in letters older than my species, and I understood that I had not found this place by accident. That some long road my whole life, my whole strange devotion to the Forerunners, the inexplicable way their script resolved for me, had been leading me here, to be chosen by a seal made 400,000 years ago, to keep a thing a dying civilization could neither use nor destroy. And then I read the last part, the part that told me what being the keeper actually meant, and it was not what I expected, and it was the heart of everything that followed. Keeper, the inscription said, understand what we ask of you. We do not ask you to open the seal. The thing inside must never be released. We could not use it safely, and neither can you, and neither can anyone, for it is the kind of power that destroys whoever holds it and everything around them. We do not ask you to use it. We ask you to keep it, to stand watch as we stood watch, and to ensure that the seal remains unbroken, not by guarding it with force, for force cannot protect it, but by being what a keeper is. The one who understands that the thing must never be opened, and who will give everything to ensure that it never is. Because here is the danger, keeper, the danger we could not solve and must leave to you. The seal cannot be broken by force. We made certain of that. But the seal can be opened by a keeper, by one worthy to open it, for we could not make a seal that could be opened by no one. Such a seal is merely a wall, and walls fail. So we made a seal that opens only for a keeper, trusting that one worthy to be a keeper would also be wise enough never to open it. That is the paradox we leave you. You and only you can open the seal. You are the one being in the galaxy with the power to release the thing inside. And your task, the whole of your task, the reason the seal chose you, is to spend your life with that power and never use it. To be the one who can open it and chooses always not to. For the thing inside will call to you. It will offer you everything. It will promise you power beyond imagining, and it will be telling the truth, and you must refuse it every day for the rest of your life. That is what it means to keep the unbroken seal, not to guard a door, to hold a power you must never use, and to remain against all temptation, the kind of person who will never use it. We are sorry to ask this of you. It is a heavy thing to be given the one power you must never use and to carry it alone. But someone must. The thing cannot be unmade, and so someone must always be its keeper, and the seal will always choose someone worthy when the time is right. You are that someone now. We chose to trust the future, to trust that whoever could read these words would be worthy of the burden they describe. We are trusting you, keeper, across 400,000 years. Please, be worthy of it. Keep the seal unbroken. And when your time comes, set a watch as we did, and trust the next keeper as we have trusted you. I finished reading as the small white sun came up over the red desert, and I stood there in the wind, a human archaeologist who had come to read a dead language and had instead been handed the heaviest trust in the galaxy. The one power I must never use, the seal I must keep unbroken, the watch the Forerunners had kept until they died and now had passed to me. And I knew already, with a cold certainty, That the hardest part was not going to be the burden itself. The hardest part was going to be everyone else, because I was not alone on Tessin IV. There were conquered observers in that camp, representatives of the great galactic powers, and the moment they understood what was inside the structure, the moment they understood that there was a power here that a dying god civilization could neither use nor destroy, they were not going to want it kept. They were going to want it opened. I made a decision that first morning in the wind with the sun coming up red over the desert, and it was the wrong decision, and it nearly cost everything, and I'd make it again. I decided to lie. When the team woke and gathered and asked me what the inscription said, I told them part of the truth and buried the rest. I told them it was a memorial, a message left by the last of the Forerunners, a record of a dying civilization. I told them the structure was a tomb, a sealed monument, a place of mourning. All of that was true as far as it went. What I didn't tell them was the rest. I didn't tell them about the thing inside, the power that could be neither used nor destroyed. I didn't tell them about the seal, or that it could be opened, or that it had named me its keeper. I looked at the conquered observers, at the representatives of the great galactic powers, watching me with their patient ancient eyes, and something in me, some instinct older than reason, said, they must not know. I think I understood, even then, before I had any proof, what would happen if they knew. The inscription had told me the thing inside was a power beyond imagining, a power a god civilization had been unable to use safely. And I knew the galaxy. I knew the great powers. I knew that there is no power so dangerous that someone won't convince themselves they can be the one to wield it safely. The Forerunners had been wiser and older and greater than anyone now alive, and they couldn't use it. But the great powers wouldn't believe that. They'd believe what powerful people always believe, that the rule applies to others, not to them, that they would be the exception, that a weapon a dying god race had sealed away in despair would be, in their hands, a triumph. They would want it opened, and I was the only one who could open it, and the inscription had been very clear, it must never be opened. So I lied. A human archaeologist, alone with the heaviest trust in the galaxy, decided that the great powers could not be allowed to know what she'd found, and began, that first morning, to try to protect a 400,000-year-old secret from the people standing right beside her. It didn't work for long. These things never do. The conquered observers were not fools. That was the thing I'd underestimated. The lead observer was a being named Vale Soon, old, careful, sharp, a representative of one of the great founding powers, and the kind of mind that had spent a long life learning to notice what people tried to hide. And Vale soon watched me, that first day and the next, and saw that something was wrong. Saw that the human specialist, who'd been so open before, had gone careful and quiet after a night alone with the inscription. Saw that I was hiding something. And Vale soon did the patient thing. Didn't confront me. Just watched and waited and quietly began to work on the inscription independently, recording it, sending it back through conquered channels, setting the great galactic institutions to the task of deciphering it. I'd told them it would take years to read. I'd counted on that. But I'd underestimated the conquered's resources, and I'd underestimated something else, that the inscription's strange property, that it resolved only for a worthy keeper, meant that the conquered's experts couldn't fully read it, which told Vale soon something crucial. It told them that I could read what they couldn't, that the human specialist had understood something the combined expertise of the galaxy could not, and that I was hiding it. You can read it, Vale soon said to me on the 6th day alone in the wind outside the structure. Not a question. Our finest minds cannot. The script resists them, it resolves into nothing as if it were written to be unreadable. And yet you stood before it for one night and went silent and have been hiding something ever since. So I will ask you plainly, Dr. Marsh, keeper of secrets, what does the inscription say? And what is inside this tomb that you do not want us to know about? I looked at Vale soon, at the patient ancient eyes, at the representative of powers far older and greater than humanity, and I made the second decision. I decided to tell some of the truth, to try to make them understand the danger, to hope that the Forerunner's own warning would be enough. I was wrong about that too. I told Vale soon about the thing inside, about the power the Forerunners could neither use nor destroy, about the seal and the warning and the dying civilization's plea that it never be opened. I told it as the Forerunners had told it to me, as a danger, a burden, a thing to be kept, never used. I thought naively that the warning of a god civilization would carry weight, that if the Forerunners themselves had said this cannot be used safely, we tried and failed, the great powers would listen. Vale soon listened to all of it, and at the end, Vale soon was quiet for a long moment, and then said the thing that confirmed every fear the Forerunners had carved into stone. The Forerunners could not use it safely, Vale soon said slowly. I understand. They were great and even they failed. But Dr. Marsh, the Forerunners died 400,000 years ago. They were great, yes, but they were not all-knowing, and they did not have what we have now. 400,000 years of advancement they never saw. What was uncontrollable to them might be controllable to us. What destroyed them might be mastered by minds and tools they could not imagine. To assume that because the Forerunners failed, we must also fail, that is not wisdom. That is superstition. We would be foolish to leave a power of this magnitude sealed away on the word of a dead race, simply because they lacked the means to control what we might well master. Vale Soon's eyes were bright now, with the thing I dreaded, appetite, the hunger of the powerful for more power. This must be studied. Carefully, yes. Responsibly, yes. But studied. And if it can be controlled, if a power that a god race could only seal away can be mastered by the civilizations of today, then it would change everything. It would be the greatest discovery in the history of the galaxy. We cannot simply leave it locked in the dark because frightened ancients asked us to. There it was. Exactly what the Forerunners had feared. Exactly why they'd made a seal that could be opened by no force. Because they'd known that someone, eventually, would convince themselves that the dead race's failure was no reason for the living to abstain. What destroyed them might be mastered by us. The oldest, deadliest lie of the powerful, spoken by a being old enough to know better, and meaning every word. You can't open it, I said. By force, the seal can't be broken, the Forerunners made sure. And Vale soon looked at me, and smiled, a slow, terrible, knowing smile, and said the thing that turned my blood to ice. No, Vale soon agreed. It cannot be broken by force. We have already determined that. The seal is beyond any power we have to force. A pause. But it was not made to be unopenable, Dr. Marsh. A seal that opens to no one is merely a wall, and the Forerunners did not build a wall. They built a seal that opens to a keeper, to one worthy to open it, and the inscription resolves only for that keeper, which means the keeper is here. The keeper exists now on this world among us. The seal has already chosen its keeper, or it would not have let the inscription be read. The smile widened. And there is only one person on this world who can read the inscription, only one person for whom the script resolves, only one person the seal has chosen. Vale Soon's eyes fixed on me. You, Dr. Marsh, you are the keeper. You are the one being in this galaxy who can open the Unbroken Seal. The Forerunners made a power that can be released by exactly one person, and that person is standing in front of me. So you see, I do not need to break the seal. I need only to convince or compel the keeper to open it. That was the moment the trap closed, and I understood the full horror of what the Forerunners had left me. They'd made the seal openable only by a worthy keeper, trusting that one worthy to keep it would be wise enough never to open it. But they hadn't reckoned with this, that the keeper could be pressured, that the great powers, unable to force the seal, would simply turn all their force on the one person who could open it. The seal was unbreakable. But the keeper was a single human being, alone, far from home, surrounded by the representatives of powers that wanted what she alone could give them. And Vale soon applied the pressure. In every form it came. First, persuasion. The reasonable voice, the patient arguments. Think of what the power could do in careful hands. Think of the good it could accomplish. The Forerunners were frightened and dying. We are confident and rising. You would not be releasing a weapon. You would be giving the galaxy a gift it could learn to use wisely. You, Dr. Marsh, could be the one who gave the galaxy the Forerunners' greatest power, mastered at last. Think of your name in history. Think of the good. Then, when persuasion failed, pressure, the weight of the great powers brought to bear. I was reminded, gently and then less gently, that I was a human, a member of a young, minor species, here on sufferance, surrounded by the agents of ancient powers. That humanity's standing in the galaxy was not strong. That a human who cooperated with the conquered on a discovery of this magnitude would earn her species great favor, and a human who obstructed the conquered, who hoarded the galaxy's greatest discovery for herself out of superstitious fear, would bring her species great trouble. The threat was never quite spoken, but it was always there. Open the seal, or humanity pays. And then, worst of all, temptation. Because Vale soon was right that the thing inside called to me. The inscription had warned me it would, and it did. Alone at night near the structure, I could feel it, the sealed power, aware of me, its keeper, reaching for me. It offered me things. Not in words exactly, but in a pull, a pressure, a promise. It showed me what I could do if I opened it. The power to protect humanity forever. The power to end every threat to the people I loved. The power to make the galaxy's great powers, who look down on my young species, kneel. It was the truth, too. That was the terrible thing. The thing the Forerunners had warned of. The power was real, and it would do everything it promised. And all I had to do was open the seal I alone could open, and I would hold in my hands the strength to remake everything. I stood at the edge of that more than once, in the long nights on Tessin IV. A human archaeologist, far from home, pressured by the great powers, tempted by a god race's weapon, holding alone the one power that must never be used. And I understood, finally and fully, what the Forerunners had meant when they said the task was not to guard a door, but to be the kind of person who would never open it. Because the door was in my own hands, and no one could stop me from opening it. And the only thing standing between the galaxy and a power that had destroyed its makers was whether one tired human could keep refusing, night after night, a thing she had every reason and every pressure and every temptation to do. I won't pretend I was strong the whole time. I wasn't. There was a night, I'll be honest, because the whole point of this is honesty, there was a night when I almost did it. When the pressure from Vale soon had been at its worst, when they'd made the threat to humanity clearest, when I was most alone and most afraid, and the power was reaching for me, offering me the strength to make all of it stop. I went to the seal that night. I put my hand on it. I felt it respond to me, its keeper, felt it begin to open at my touch, felt how easy it would be, and I understood that I was one choice away from releasing the thing the Forerunners had died to contain. And what stopped me, I've thought about this for the rest of my life, what stopped me was not strength. I didn't have any strength left that night. What stopped me was the inscription. The voices of the Forerunners, carved in stone 400,000 years ago, who had known this exact moment would come. Because they had written, near the end, a thing I hadn't told anyone, a thing meant only for the keeper, for exactly this night. Keeper, there will come a night when you almost open it, when the pressure and the fear and the temptation are too much, and you stand at the seal with your hand upon it, and you are one breath from releasing what must never be released. We know this night will come because it came for us too. Every keeper faces it. And so we tell you the thing that saved us, the only thing that can save you. The power will tell you that opening it will protect the ones you love. That is the lie at the heart of it, the lie it tells every keeper. But understand, the power does not protect, it destroys. It destroyed us. It will destroy everything you love faster and more completely than any threat you fear. The thing it offers to save them is the very thing that will end them. So when you stand at the seal with your hand upon it, certain that opening it will protect what you love, know that you are feeling the exact moment we felt, the exact lie we were told, and that the proof of the lie is us. We opened ourselves to it once to save ourselves, and it is why we are dust and you are reading our grave. Do not open it to protect them. Opening it is how you lose them. Close your hand, step back, keep the seal. That is how you protect what you love. The only way. I read those words in my memory with my hand on the seal, and I understood that the Forerunners had reached across 400,000 years to stop me at the exact moment I needed stopping. That they had known. That every keeper faced this night, and that the dead had left, for this night, the one truth that could save me. The powers promised to protect is the lie that destroys. I closed my hand, I stepped back, I kept the seal. And I understood then that I could not stay on Tessin IV, because Vale soon and the great powers would not stop. As long as I was within their reach, the pressure would continue, and there would be other bad nights, and someday, maybe not me, but someday, some keeper under enough pressure, the seal would open. The Forerunners had kept it safe by dying out, by leaving it on a forgotten world, by trusting to deep time and obscurity. But I had found it. And in finding it, I had exposed it, and now the great powers knew it existed and knew I was the key, and the only way to keep the seal unbroken was to take the one action the Forerunners hadn't been able to take. I had to make sure no one could ever pressure the keeper again. I had to take the seal and myself, its keeper, beyond the reach of anyone who would want it opened. And I had a plan for how, and it was going to cost me everything. And it was the only way to keep the trust the dead had placed in me. The plan I made on Tessin IV was desperate, and it depended on a thing I'd read in the inscription that I hadn't fully understood until that bad night at the seal. And I want to walk you through it carefully, because it's the heart of how a single tired human kept a god race's weapon out of the galaxy's hands. The Forerunners, in the part of the inscription meant only for the keeper, had told me more than how to survive the bad night. They had told me about the nature of the seal, and about a thing the keeper could do that I had not let myself consider, because it was terrible. The seal could not be broken by force, and it could be opened by the keeper. But there was a third thing. The keeper could bind it. Could do the thing the Forerunners themselves had done when they built it, could merge with the seal, become part of it, make themselves the lock as well as the key. A keeper who bound themselves to the seal would become its permanent guardian, not standing watch beside it, but becoming it. They were woven into the seal itself, so that the seal could no longer be opened by pressure or persuasion or temptation directed at a separate, vulnerable person, because there would no longer be a separate person to pressure. The keeper and the seal would be one, and no force could break it, and no keeper could be compelled to open it, because the keeper would be the keeping forever. It was how the Forerunners had done it, I understood now. The watch they'd set that had lasted until they died, it hadn't been guards standing in shifts. It had been keepers, one after another across the ages, binding themselves to the seal, becoming its guardian, until the last of them died and the seal waited, unbound, for the next worthy keeper to come. For me. And the cost, the reason I called it terrible, was that binding yourself to the seal meant the end of your life as a living being. Not death, exactly. Something stranger. The keeper who bound themselves became part of the seal, their consciousness woven into it, watchful and aware but no longer alive in the way they had been, no longer human, no longer free, no longer able to walk away or go home or be a person in the world. They became the watch. Forever, or until the next keeper came to relieve them, which might be never, which might be another 400,000 years. That was the price of keeping the seal truly unbroken, not a heroic death, a kind of endless vigil, the surrender of your entire life to becoming the thing that guards the thing that must never be released. And I decided to pay it. I didn't decide easily. I want to be honest about that. I sat with it for 2 days in the camp while Vale Soon's pressure mounted, and I thought about everything I'd be giving up. My work, my life, my home Earth, which I'd see again someday, which I loved. The simple, ordinary future of a human being traded for an endless vigil bound to an ancient weapon on a dead world at the edge of nowhere. It was everything. It was my whole life, and every life I might have had. And what decided me in the end was the same thing that had stopped my hand at the seal, the Forerunners, because I understood, finally, what they had actually done and what they had trusted me to do. They had been a great civilization, spanning the stars, and they had made a thing that could have made them gods, and instead it had begun to destroy them. And rather than let it loose on the galaxy, rather than gamble that someone, someday, might control what they could not, they had chosen to spend themselves keeping it sealed. Generation after generation of Forerunners, binding themselves to the seal, giving up their lives to the vigil, until their whole civilization wound down to dust in the keeping of it. They had died out in part because they kept the seal, because they poured their best into the endless watch instead of into surviving. They had traded their own civilization's future for the galaxy's safety, and they had done it not knowing if anyone would ever come to thank them, or even know, carving their plea into stone and casting it into deep time, trusting a future they would never see. That was the trust I'd inherited, not just to keep the seal, but to be worthy of the ones who'd kept it before me, the dead who'd given everything, asking nothing, for a galaxy that feared them and called their grave a curse. How could I do less? How could I, having read their plea, having understood their sacrifice, walk away and leave the seal exposed to the great powers because I wanted to keep my own small life? The Forerunners had given their entire civilization. I could give one life, mine. So I decided, and then I had to actually do it, with Vale soon and the great powers watching, determined to stop me, because the moment they understood I meant to bind the seal beyond their reach forever, they would do anything to prevent it. The end came fast, the way ends do. I made my move at night, the time the seal was most responsive to its keeper. I slipped out of the camp and went to the structure, to the inscription, to the door that only I could open. And Vale soon, who had been watching me as closely as I'd been watching the seal, understood at once what I was doing, and came after me with the conquered security detail, to stop the keeper from putting herself and the seal beyond their reach. They reached me at the door, Vale soon, and the agents of the great powers, in the wind and the dark, with the structure rising over us and the inscription glowing faintly in my light. And Vale soon made one last argument, not patient now, but urgent, almost pleading, because Vale soon understood that the galaxy's greatest prize was about to be locked away forever. "Dr. Marsh, Lena, don't do this," Vale soon said. "Whatever you're planning, think. You would throw away the greatest discovery in history. You would deny the galaxy a power that could end war, end scarcity, end every threat we face. On the word of a dead race too frightened and too primitive to control what they made. You would give up your own life. I can see it in you. You mean to sacrifice yourself for superstition, for the fears of ancients who didn't have what we have. Please, step away from the door. Let us study it. Let us at least try to master it before we lock it away forever. You could be the one who gave the galaxy everything. Don't become the one who buried it instead." And I looked at Vale soon, at the appetite and the certainty and the genuine, sincere belief that this time with us it would be different, and I understood that this was the final form of the temptation, the most dangerous one because it wasn't malice. Vale soon truly believed. The great powers truly believed they could be the exception. They always do. And that sincere belief was exactly why the seal could never be left in their reach. Because there is no end to the number of wise, sincere, powerful beings who will be certain that they are the ones who can finally use safely the thing that destroys everyone who uses it. "You're right that I'm going to give up my life," I said, "and you're right that it's for the word of a dead race. But you're wrong about why." I put my hand on the door, felt the seal respond, felt it begin to open to its keeper, felt the whole terrible power of it ready to answer me. "You think the Forerunners were primitive and frightened. They weren't. They were greater than you'll ever be, and they understood something you can't, because you have the thing they had, the certainty that you'd be the exception. They had it too once, and it destroyed them. Everything they were, every wonder they built, all of it is dust on this dead world, because once long ago they were as sure as you are that they could control it. I felt the seal at the edge of opening, and instead of opening it, I reached for the other thing, the binding, the merging, the vigil. And then they got wise. Too late to save themselves, but not too late to save everyone after. They spent the rest of their civilization keeping this thing locked away, generation after generation, giving up everything so that the rest of the galaxy would never have to learn the lesson they learned. They left their grave as a warning, and the galaxy called it a curse and feared them and never once thanked them. My voice broke. Well, I read their words. I know what they gave, and I am not going to let it have been for nothing. I am not going to hand the great powers the thing the Forerunners died to keep from exactly this, from sincere, certain, powerful people who are sure they'd be the exception. The watch doesn't end with the Forerunners. It passes to me. And I'm going to keep it. And I bound myself to the seal. I can't fully describe what that was like, becoming part of the seal, because it's not a human experience and there are no human words for it. But I'll tell you what I can. It didn't feel like dying. It felt like taking up something, like putting my shoulder at last under a weight that had been waiting for me my whole life. The weight I'd been walking toward since the first time a Forerunner inscription resolved for me when it should have been unreadable, since the long strange road that had shaped my mind, across all those years, into the shape of a keeper. I felt myself woven into the seal, my will becoming its will, my watchfulness becoming its lock. I felt the thing inside, the terrible power, which had called to me, which had offered me everything. I felt it become aware that its keeper was now its prison, that the one person who could open it had made herself the thing that never would. I felt it rage, and I felt it go quiet, contained now by a will that had chosen, with full understanding, to never let it out. And I felt the others. That was the thing I hadn't expected, the thing that turned my terrible sacrifice into something else, because I was not alone in the seal. The Forerunners were there, not alive, not conscious in the way I'd been, but present, the long line of keepers who had bound themselves before me, their watchfulness still woven into the seal across all the ages, a presence I could feel like warmth, like company, like the welcome of those who'd kept the watch before and had been so alone in it, and were alone no longer because someone had finally come. I had thought I was sacrificing myself to a solitary, endless vigil. Instead, I had joined the oldest and most faithful company in the galaxy, the Keepers, across 400,000 years, who had each given everything to keep the galaxy safe from a thing it didn't even know to fear, and who had waited in the seal for the next one to come and share the watch. You came, I felt them say without words. We waited so long, and you came, and you understood, and you chose. Welcome, Keeper, welcome. You are not alone now. None of us are alone now. Keep the watch with us. And Vale soon, and the great powers outside, found that the seal had changed, that it was no longer openable at all by anyone, by any pressure or persuasion or force, because its keeper had become its lock and could never be compelled, because there was no longer a separate vulnerable person to compel. The one human who could have opened it had made certain that no one ever would. The unbroken seal was, at last, truly unbroken, bound by a keeper who had chosen the vigil over her own life, the way every keeper before her had chosen it, the way the watch had always been kept. I'm telling you this from inside the seal in a sense, though telling isn't quite the word and inside isn't quite the place, and time doesn't work in here the way it does out there. I don't know how long it's been. It might be years. It might be much longer. The vigil doesn't measure time the way the living do. The great powers gave up eventually. There was nothing they could do. The seal was beyond them now, truly and finally, its keeper bound and uncompellable. Vale soon, I think, came to understand in the end what I'd done and why. The records suggest the conquered eventually classified Tessin IV as a closed world, a place not to be disturbed, a grave to be left in peace. Maybe Vale soon even came to be grateful in time that the choice had been taken out of their hands, that someone had been wise enough, or stubborn enough, to make sure the great powers never got to learn the Forerunners' lesson the hard way. I'd like to think so. The powerful are not always wrong forever. Sometimes they just need the choice made safe, so they can be relieved it wasn't left to them. And humanity, my own people, I never saw them again, never went home, never had the ordinary life I traded away. But I learned, in the strange, timeless way of the seal, that the story got out, that a human archaeologist had found a Forerunner tomb and given her life to keep a terrible power sealed away from the great powers of the galaxy. That humanity, the young minor species, had produced a keeper, had been the one, out of all the galaxy, whose road had shaped a mind worthy of the watch. The galaxy that had looked down on my species learned that the Forerunners' 400,000-year trust had passed in the end to a human, and I think that meant something out there. I think it changed a little how the galaxy saw us, not because we were powerful, because one of us was worthy of a trust the great powers had wanted only to exploit. People ask, I imagine people ask out there telling this story, what the lesson is, what it means, that a human touched an ancient tomb and read her own title in letters older than her species. And I think the lesson is the thing the Forerunners understood and the great powers never could, that the highest use of power is sometimes to refuse it, that the worthiest thing a person can do with a weapon that could make them a god is to make certain no one ever uses it, including themselves. The great powers thought the Forerunner seal was a prize, a discovery, a thing to be opened and exploited. They never understood that it was a test, a 400,000-year test of whether the galaxy could produce, when the time came, someone who could hold ultimate power and choose freely to lay it down forever. The Forerunners had passed that test at the cost of their civilization. And they had trusted the future to keep passing it, keeper after keeper, each one worthy, each one choosing the vigil over the power. I was the one the test came to, a human archaeologist of a young and minor species who loved the dead enough to understand them. And when I touched the ancient tomb and read the inscription that named me, I learned what I had been chosen for, and I chose to be worthy of it. Keeper of the Unbroken Seal. It was carved before my species existed, and it was waiting for me, and now it is what I am, and what I will be for as long as the watch needs keeping. I kept it unbroken. I'm keeping it still. And I am not alone, none of us are, the long, faithful company of keepers, holding the dark away from a galaxy that will never know our names. That's enough. That was always enough. It's why the Forerunners could do it, and it's why I can. You keep the watch not to be thanked. You keep it because someone must, and because you were the one who came, and because the ones you protect are worth a vigil they'll never know they needed. The seal is unbroken. It always will be. A human touched an ancient tomb and read her own name in letters older than her species. The galaxy thought she'd found a weapon. She'd found a test, and she passed it, the way the worthiest always do, by holding ultimate power and choosing to lay it down forever.